Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session, our second session looking at The Golden Age by Thomas Heywood, a continuing mission to work through the Age's plays, of which there are a number. We left last time in a not terribly comfortable place, and so we're going to open this session with a trigger warning of possible sexual violence coming forward, and lots of early modern views that are distinctly problematic. So you have been warned about that coming up now. Any play featuring Jupiter you kind of expect that this kind of material is going to turn up, and that's probably going to be one of our major queries in terms of this text, as what we do with it next, and what we do with that kind of material. We are also suffering in the heat with some gremlins and some of our connectivity, so hopefully we're all going to still be here by the end of the session, but who knows? Hopefully still in the room and able to hear what we're saying. Reading Lycaon and Clown is...
Hello, I'm Helen Good. I'm a historian in Hull.
Reading Titan and Archas today is...
that must be me. My name's Lynn. I live in the northwestern United States.
Reading Diana, Lord Number 1, and Melliseus is...
Hi, I'm Tamara. I am an actor and producer currently living in Germany, hoping to come back to the UK.
Reading all Satyrs and Juno today is...
Hi, I'm Eric and I'm here.
Reading Enceladus and Sibylla today is...
Me, Briony, Sparrow, actor in Lincolnshire.
Reading Jupiter today is...
Aliki, Chapple, actor and translator in Lancashire.
Reading Homer and Saturn today is...
Hi, Alan Scott, based in Suffolk.
Reading Calisto and Neptune is...
Lois Potter, retired academic living in London.
And reading Aegeon, Lord Number 2, and Pluto is...
Rachael, Nicole, actor on the East Coast.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I'll be reading stage directions, generally trying to keep everything moving in a general forward direction. We're going from Act 2, Scene 4 today, and just a repeat of the trigger warning where we are. Jupiter has managed to talk his way into the train of the various nymphs led by Diana, specifically to follow Calisto, and we are going to see what happens next as we go into Act 2, Scene 4. Horns are winded, a great noise of hunting. Enter all her nymphs in the chase. Jupiter pulling Calisto back.
Follow, pursue, the stag hath took the mountain. Come, let us climb the steep cliffs after him. Let through the air your nimble javelins sing, and our free spoils home with the evening bring.
Follow.
And more horns. Enter the Satyrs, as in the chase.
The nimble ladies have outstripped us quite. Unless we speed, we shall not see him fall. We are too slow in pursuit of our game. Let's after, though, since they outstrip our eyes, run by the notes that from their bugles rise.
There's more horns into Jupiter and Callisto.
Haste, gentle lady, we shall lose our train and miss Diana's pastime in the chase. Hie then, to stain our javelins' gilded points in blood of yon swift stag so hot pursued. Will you keep pace with me?
I am tired already, nor have I yet been to these pastimes breathed. Sweet, shall we repose we here ourselves a little?
And lose the honour to be first at fall?
Oh, fear not, you shall come time enough to fall. Either you must be so unkind to me as leave me to these deserts solitary, or stay till I have rest, for I am breathless and cannot hold it out. Behold, a place remote, an arbour seated naturally, trimmed by the hand of nature for a bower, screened by the shadowy leaves from the sun's eye. Sweet will you sit, or on the verdure lie?
Rather than leave you, I will lose the sport.
I'll find you pastime, fear not. O my angel, whither wilt thou transport me? Grant me measure of joy before I surfeit on this pleasure.
Come, shall's lie down a little?
Sooth, I will. I thirst in seas, and cannot quaff my fill. Behold before me a rich table spread, and yet, poor, I am forced to starve for bread. We be alone, the ladies far in chase. May I die a eunuch by my vow. You escape me now. Sweet bedfellow, your hand. What have I felt unless blanched snow of substance not to melt?
You grip hard.
Good sooth, I shall not rest until my head be pillowed on thy breast.
Lean on me then.
So shall I wrong mine eyes to leave your face, to look upon the skies? Oh, how I love thee. Come, let's kiss and play.
How?
So a woman with a woman may.
I do not like this kissing.
Sweet, sit still. Lend me thy lips that I may taste my fill.
You kiss too wantonly.
Thy bosom lend, and by thy soft paps let my hand descend.
Nay, fie, what mean you?
Oh, prithee, let me toy. I would the gods would shape thee to a boy, or me into a man.
A man, how then?
Nay, sweet, lie still, for we are far from men. Lie down again. Your foot I oft have praised, ay, and your leg. Nay, let your skirt be raised. I'll measure for the wager of a fall, who hath the greatest great, or smallest small.
You are too wanton, and your hand too free.
You need not blush to let a woman see.
My bareness I have hid from sight of skies, therefore may bar it any lady's eyes.
Methinks you should be fat. Play, let me feel.
Oh, God, you tickle me.
Lend me your hand and freely taste me. Note how I will stand. I'm not ticklish.
Lord, how well you woo.
We maids may wish much, but can nothing do.
I am weary of this toying.
Oh, but I in this Elysium could both live and die. Can forbear no longer. Though my rape be punished with my head, she shall not escape. Say, sweet, were I a man?
Thus would I rise and fill the dales and mountains with my cries. A man, oh heaven, to gain Elysium's bliss, I'd not be said that I a man should kiss. Come, let's go wound the stag.
Stay ere you go. Here stands one ready that must strike a doe, and thou art she. I am Pelasgia's king, that thus have singled thee, mine thou shalt be.
Gods, angels, men, help all, a maid to free.
Maugre them all, thou'rt mine.
To do me right, help fingers, feet, nails, teeth, and all to fight.
Not they, nor all Diana's angel train, were they in sight this prize away should gain.
He carries her away in his arms. We progress to Homer's oration between the acts. Homer.
Young Jupiter doth force this bounteous maid, and after would have made her his bright queen. But discontent, she in the forest stayed, loath of Diana's virgins to be seen. Oft did he write, oft send, but all in vain. She never will return to court again. 8 moons are filled and waned when she grows great, and young Jove's issue in her womb doth spring. This day Diana doth her nymphs entreat unto a solemn bathing, where they bring deflowered Calisto. Note how she would hide that which time found and great Diana spied.
A dumb show. Enter Diana and all her nymphs to bathe them. She makes them survey the place. They unlace themselves and unloose their buskins. Only Callisto refuseth to make her ready. Diana sends Atalanta to her, who, perforce unlacing her, finds her great belly, and shows it to Diana, who turns her out of her society and leaves her. Callisto likewise in great sorrow forsakes the place.
Crime thus found, she's banished from their crew, and in a cave she childs a valiant son, called Archas, who doth noble deeds pursue, and by Jove's gift Melliseus' seat hath won, which after by his worth and glorious fame he hath transtyled Arcadia by his name. But we return to Titan, who by spies hath learned that Saturn hath kept sons alive. He now assembles all his strange allies, and for the crown of Crete intends to strive. Of their success and fortunes we proceed, where Titan's sons by youthful Jove must bleed.
And there we'll pause. Homer there setting up a return to an earlier plot and closing off this particular section of the myths in Dumb Show. Okay, that's quite a hard scene. Thoughts from the room as to where we are in this narrative. The fact that these are myths that are known, that are being dealt with. The bits that we see, the bits that are just visual, the scenes that are enacted, the choices that are going on here. I'll go to Briony first, then Eric.
I'm glad they didn't take it any further on stage than they did, but that was really well written and therefore horrible to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's the last lines of Callisto as well. There's something about that, the fingers, teeth, nails, teeth. I mean, it's creating images with the words as well as what's going on with the stage, and there are directions in there as to what's going on. Eric.
I was going to say that he's a king, therefore it means that he won't suffer the consequences, which is typical of also this era, but also powerful men, like certain men we know nowadays who are kind of in power and might do things like this or worse and sort of don't get condemned for their crimes.
Well, and it's not only that afterwards he's writing and sends to her and that but all in vain. Well, duh. But yeah, that expectation from Jupiter that it'll still be fine. Come with me. We'll it'll be cool. Which just really speaks to that mindset as well. Eric.
I also have a question. Was this kind of crime treated as a crime at the time? Would it have been the woman's fault back then, or would it have been seen as the man's fault? Because I'm just curious because of her crime thus found, because that would be true in certain places, I guess.
It's always the woman's fault.
But in the context of that line, the crime found is slightly different, I think, in terms of the actual. It's being discovered amongst the nymphs, so there's a slightly different thing going on there as to which what crime is being perceived at that point. Helen, then Lois.
Yeah, rape, I'm sure, was a crime, but it was much more of a. There would be a civil action, because a rape was a denial of the rights of whatever man controlled the woman. So the husband or the father of the woman would have a civil action against the rapist. But nevertheless, I mean, the theory was that however much the woman resisted and however little it was the woman's fault, nevertheless, it's like Lucrece. The only way she can regain her honor is by killing herself.
Lois.
Yeah, I mean, the crime is really against those laws that we read out yesterday, the laws of Diana's nymphs, which are that you're not supposed to have anything to do with men. Therefore, Jupiter hasn't broken them, but she has, even though, of course, in her case, it was totally unintentional.
Briony, and then Rachael.
But he committed a crime by pretending to be a woman and infiltrating the group in the first place to be able to then impregnate her. So it's strange that as yet he's got away with that. No, there's been no. Suddenly they noticed that one of their newest recruits has disappeared round about the same time that she started to, get bigger in the belly. So I wonder whether or not that will ever come back, or whether it's just.
Yeah, in this dumb show, Diana isn't asking any questions. It's just straightforwardly an assumption is made, and because it's not dialogue, because it's a dumb show, it's a straightforward action in that sense. So that level of complexity that might exist there is not necessarily enacted. Rachael, then Alan, then Helen.
Yeah, I wonder if her being blamed for this, I think that the guy who's writing this is Heywood. It's Heywood, so he's a man. But I think using a whole thing of fictional women to blame her is different than it was all men. Like what was it last week with Isabella, where it was all men judging her as opposed to women. That's supposed to say something subtle, that it's women blaming women or something for this, but also contemporary Artemisia Gentileschi, the artist of the time. She was very famous because her father went to court because the tutor he hired to teach her to paint, raped her, and one of her servants had been the aid to it, and she had actually called out and fought back a lot, and it was the only thing that the father could take him to court for really was that he pay the dowry or something that she would have gotten from somebody. And I think even though the court went in his favor, he might not have ever gotten any money, and not a lot was really done for her. So it's not the same country, but it's like a contemporaneous, slightly legal case that might show the attitudes of, people of the region, if we're considering Europe one region, even though there's diversity there.
Alan, then Helen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking 2 points. One, a good lawyer would probably argue that there was no clause in Diana's laws about personation, and therefore, if it's not explicitly stated in law, there is no offence. That's the sort of thing lawyers make an awful lot of money out of. But the other point is that the Homer piece that I just read out looks like we've actually now moved on effectively the equivalent of another generation, because her son has actually achieved taking over the kingdom of his absent father.
That there is another time jump going on.
Yeah.
Yep, that's very probable. I think there's going to be a lot of them. In fact, I think that's pretty much going to happen every act. Helen.
Yeah, I think we ought to recognize that if Jupiter had been witnessed by Diana or any of the other nymphs, then it would have been a completely different situation, because I think he would have been torn to pieces unless he was invulnerable to such things. I think that the fact that she did not immediately complain would tell Calisto did not immediately complain, would tell against her. She tried to hide what had happened. Therefore, she had no recourse 8 months later. But I don't think that Diana and co would have let Jupiter get away with it had they known about it at the time.
He'd have been turned into a stag and torn apart by dogs or whatever.
Whatever, yeah.
And it's it's that question of how people react to things, how shame functions, and also how people can internalize patriarchal values, even if they're trying to separate themselves from them. These things can continue as well. Lois, then Eric.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about contemporary audiences. I mean, this was obviously played by a boy, Calisto, that is, and it does seem to be a pretty realistic struggle. And obviously, it couldn't be taken any further on the stage. But it does strike me that some of that language and presumably the action that went with it would be incredibly titillating.
Yeah, it's a question of what that scene is doing and what we might be doing with that in hypothetical future things. Eric, before we move on.
I was just going to say sort of like something basically that Lynn mentioned yesterday and Lois mentioned earlier. Basically, the whole oath-breaking thing is continuing here.
Yes, we had a lot of oaths being made, and the danger of making oaths, especially when people are sort of expected to stick to them. And terrible things sometimes happen when you don't, and sometimes it doesn't happen when you don't. And so there's a conversation that might be had about that as we gather more evidence. We go into Act 3, Scene 1. As Homer has already stated, we're going back to the Titan-Saturn struggle, as it were, who's in charge. So, Act 3, Scene 1, enter Titan, Lycaon, Enceladus, Aegeon in arms, drum, colours, and attendants.
Now we are strong, our giant issue grown, our sons in several kingdoms we have planted, from whence we have derived us brave supplies from Sicily and from the Aegean Sea. That of our son, Aegeon, bears the name. We have assembled infinites of men to avenge us on proud Saturn's perjury.
What I have said to Titan, I'll make good. 'Tis rumoured Melliseus' foster child, he that expulsed me from the Pelasgius crown, and in my high tribunal sits enthroned, is Saturn's son, and styled Jupiter. Besides, my daughter by his lust deflowered, on us the poor distressed Titanios, he hath committed many outrages.
All which will punish on King Saturn's head. I that have made the Aegean confines shake, and with my powerful voice affrighted heaven, from whose enraged eyes the darkened skies have borrowed a lustre and Promethean fire, will fright from Crete the proud Saturnian troop, and thousand hacked and mangled soldiers bring to entomb the glories of the Cretan king.
That must be left to great Enceladus, the pride and glory of the Titans' host. I that have curled the billows with a frown, and with a smile have made the ocean calm, spurned down huge mountains with my armed foot, and with my shoulders lift the valleys high, will, in the wrinkles of my stormy brow, bury the glories of the Cretan king, and on his slaughtered bulk brain all his sons.
And what shall I do then?
Do thou stand still, whilst I the foes of Titan pash and kill. Am I not the eldest from great Titan's loins, the Saturnist's hereditary scourge? Leave all these deeds of horror to my hand. I, like a trophy, o'er the spoils will stand.
Why breathe we then?
Come, arm your sinewy limbs with rage and fury, fright pale pity hence, and drown him in the sweat your bodies still. With hostile industry toss flaming brands about your fleecy locks, to threat their cities with death and desolation. Let your steel, glistering against the sun, daze their bright eyes, that with dread of our astonishment they may be sunk in Lethe, and their grave may be the dark vault called Oblivion's cave.
Are our ambassadors to Saturn gone to let him know whence this our war proceeds?
Your message hath by this startled the usurper.
Set on them, waste their confines as we march, and let them taste the rage of sword and fire. The alarum's given, and hath by this arrived, even at the walls of Crete, the citadel where the cathedraled Saturn is enthroned.
Warlike Aegeon and Enceladus, noble Lycaon, Lend us your assistance to forage as we march. Plant desolation through all this fertile soil. Be this your cry, revenge on Saturn for his perjury.
And exit. So, yes, we're suddenly back in that action from the very beginning, but it's still referring to other stuff going on since we re-meet Lycaon, who has beef with Jupiter, it has to be said. This is the dude who was serving people's limbs at supper, but also has a daughter who, which we encountered last time. So, but there's also this weird comedy sort of scene going on here of just Enceladus just go, I will kill everyone, and everyone else is sort of going, and what are we going to do? Oh, you'll do it all for you. Lovely. So there's an interesting question about what that character is doing. Thoughts in the room, Lynn?
I'm a little bit confused because Crichton keeps talking about Saturn's perjury. He mentions that a couple of times. So is he? And he says something about Jupiter, who is said to be Saturn's son. So is it that he's assuming Jupiter, yes, indeed, is Saturn's issue, and that Saturn knew all along that his son was alive? Because we know that Saturn isn't in on this.
Yes, I think it says that Jupiter is the Saturn is not aware, but these people have good spies. They've got good intelligence.
Assumes that he is, but Titan assumes that Saturn knows something that Saturn actually doesn't know.
Yeah,
kicking.
I think that's fair. And it's leading to war, and it's not going to be good. Desolation, plant desolation through all this fertile soil. So whatever golden age is going on underneath Saturn, it's not going to be golden for much longer. Rachael, then Aliki.
I feel like this scene could be done where they're in arms, drums. Oh, I mean they're in drums. There's so much boasting. Like this is like they're all out boasting each other. But I know they're in their colors and they have their attendants and they're in arms and stuff like that. But I wonder if you could have a field scene where they're banqueting, in the field or something, and just saying all they're gonna do before they've done it in battle.
Aliki.
So I know real geography doesn't matter, but I'm a bit puzzled as to where this is taking place and how they're going to march on Crete, which is an island.
They're gods, climate change, I don't know. Maybe there's a causeway. Then, I don't know.
3 cheers for early modern geography.
Yeah.
It's just echoing that first scene where you've got brothers kind of arguing about what their lineal responsibilities are, and the eldest laying claim to the best of everything, even if that's the killing in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. Helen.
I'm getting the impression that these are becoming less manlike and more godlike. The oldest one, whose name begins with an E, is going to be flattening mountains with his feet. So we're talking about them acquiring godlike abilities.
Or unless they already had that. Yeah, we had this debate yesterday whether how actually divine are these figures. Lois.
Yeah, it's funny because the Titans were notoriously giants, but I don't know whether that means that the rest of their siblings weren't giants. It seems rather odd that Titan should be the only big one, but I think that's why all these guys are so big.
Alan.
I'm just wondering, in fact, whether the locus of that scene is in whatever the Greek equivalent or the Greco-Roman equivalent was of Valhalla.
Olympus.
Given that you've got a combination of gods and monarchs.
It feels like they're on the move, though, doesn't it? It feels like a scene in motion. They're on their way. The armies are marching, so it needs to be on the way to wherever. So maybe a paddling pool. So they're all wading through. Let's gather more data. I think let's go over to the other side as the conflict begins. Act 3, Scene 2. Enter Saturn with hair and beard overgrown. Sibylla, Juno, his lords, drum colours, soldiers, etc.
None speak. Let no harsh voice presume to jar in our distressed ear. I am all sadness, all horror and affrightment since the slaughter and tragic murder of my firstborn ops, continued in the unnatural massacre of 3 young princes. Not a day hath passed me without distaste, no night but double darkened with terror and confused melancholy, no hour but had care and discontent proportioned to his minutes, not an instant without remorse and anguish. O you crowns, why ye made and mettled out of cares? I am overgrown with sorrows, circumvolved with multiplicity of distemperatures, and Saturn is a king of nothing else but woes, vexations, sorrows, and laments. Add to these the threatenings of red war, as if the murder of my princely babes were not enough to plague an usurpation, but they must add the rage of sword and fire to affright my people. These are miseries able to be comprised in no dimension.
My father shall not macerate himself. I'll dare to interrupt his passions, although I buy it dearly with his hate. My lord, you are a king of great people. Your power is sufficient to repulse a foe greater than Titan. Though my brother's births be crowned in blood, yet I am still reserved to be the hopeful comfort of your age.
My dearest Juno, beautiful remainder of Saturn's royal issue, but for thee, I had ere this, with these my fingers torn, a grave out of the rocks, to have entombed the wretched carcass of a caitiff king. And I will live, be it but to make thee queen of all the triumphs and spoils I win. Speak, what's the project of their invasion?
That the king of Crete hath not, according to his vows and oaths, slain his male issue.
Have I not their bloods already quaffed to angry Nemesis? Have not these ruthless and remorseless eyes, unfatherlike, beheld their panting hearts swimming in bowls of blood? Am I not sonless? Nay, childless too, save Juno, whom I love. And dare they then? Come, our continued sorrow shall into scarlet indignation turn, and my son's blood shall crown their guilty heads with purple vengeance. Valiant lords, set on, and meet them to their last destruction.
March forward.
Stay, because we've ground our wars on justice. Fair Sibylla, on thy life, I charge thee, tell me, and dissemble not, by all the hopes in Saturn thou hast stored, our nuptial pleasures and affairs of love, as thou esteemed our grace or vengeance fearest. Resolve me truly, hast thou sons alive?
And Sibylla kneels.
These tears, that dejection on thy knee, accompanied with dumbness, argue guilt. Arise and speak.
Let Saturn know I am a woman, then, and more, I am a mother. Would you have me a monster to exceed in cruelty the savagest of savages? Bears, tigers, wolves, all feed their young. Would Saturn have his queen more fierce than these? Think you Sibylla dare murder her young, whom cruel beasts would spare? Let me be held a mother, not a murderess. For, Saturn, thou hast living 3 brave sons, but where? Rather than to reveal to thee that thou mayest send their guiltless blood to spill, here, seize my life, for them thou shalt not kill.
Amazement, war, the threatening oracle, all muster strange perplexions about my brain, and rob me of the true ability of my direct conceivements. Doubt and war, Titan's invasion and my jealousy, make me unfit for answer.
Royal Saturn, 'twas pity in the queen so to preserve them. Your strictness slew them, they are dead in you, and in the pity of your queen survive.
Divine assistance, plunge me from these troubles. Mortality here fails me. I am wrapped in millions of confusions.
Enter a second lord.
Arm, great Saturn, thy cities burn. A general massacre threatens thy people. The big Titanoids plow up thy land with their invasive steel. A huge unnumbered army is at hand to set upon thy camp.
All my disturbances convert to rage and make my spleen as high as is their topless fury to encounter with equal force and vengeance. Go, Sibylla, convey my beauteous Juno to the place of our best strength, while we contend in arms for this rich Cretan wreath. The battle done, and they confined, we'll treat of these affairs. Perhaps our love may with this breach dispense. But first to arms, to beat the intruders hence.
Excellent. So, yeah, Saturn did not know. Saturn definitely did not know. And it's that moment when, the Lord says, march on, and Saturn says stay. And you're sort of thinking, he's looking at the expression on Sibylla's face at that moment, isn't he? He's sort of going, hang on a minute. You're looking a bit shifty. Yeah, so it's this sad sack Saturn here. Of why is all this terrible stuff coming down on me? We agreed to kill the children. We had and this, after all I've done, and so yeah, it's the action is once again moving. The truth is out, but war is coming, and cities are burning. There's a general massacre. It's bad. Stakes are high. Rachael.
Yeah, this scene just reminds me of Patient Grizel, because there's that whole, part of that storyline where he fakes killing a child to see how loyal she'll be, and this is kind of like the inversion of that, she has agency, where the woman in that one, the wife in that one, did not, and she exercised it, and I think I don't know if somebody took that scene and compared it to this, that you could have this is the moment he realizes she's not Patient Grizel.
Yeah, is Saturn a details man? No, I don't get the impression he naturally is. Briony, are you waving? Yes.
I just thought that speech from Sibylla was really lovely. Like, she stands up for herself really well. And the fact that there isn't, he doesn't argue about it. It's done, he doesn't, there's nothing I saw that indicates that she's going to get punished for this. He's kind of accepted it. And I think that's quite nice.
Yeah, I mean, at the end he's sort of going, well, maybe we'll sort this out later. We've got a war to fight, and stuff. And, there is again, they're never stuffing too many people on stage at any one time, but we're getting that sense of a court here. And Juno gets a first appearance. They're slowly drip feeding additional characters in, which is wise, because, there might be quite a few by the time we finish this sequence. Eric?
I'm just a bit perplexed by the whole. Though my brother's births be crowned in blood, yet I am still reserved to be the beautiful, the hopeful comfort of your age. And it's like, well, aren't there most births crowned in blood, or is that just me?
I think being a little more literal as to how much blood is flowing.
Yeah,
and more importantly,
it's
whose
just an
it is.
interesting expression, sort of interesting choice of expression, and also kind of, this is not a Juno that we usually get.
Well, there's still time. There've only been 7-8 lines or something so far. And actually, we haven't really talked about the writing style, the way the language and the dialogue is functioning. There's a lot going for Heywood in this one in terms of the way it's putting dialogue together that we haven't necessarily really discussed. But yeah, maybe thoughts on that now or later. Alan, then Briony.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, Sibylla has obviously been incredibly good at keeping secrets. Because not only did Saturn not suspect, nor did Juno.
Yeah. Though, to be fair, Juno wouldn't necessarily have been in place in terms of sequence of birth and things. You know, it's once you keep the secret, you're probably safe.
She's obviously accepted the cover story.
Briony.
I was just going to say, with regards to the fact we've not really talked about his writing style, I think because the content is so fascinating, and we've been talking about that a lot, and because the writing style is good. If it was bad, it would definitely have got a mention.
Yeah, because what these plays are trying to do is they're trying to pack in so many stories and so much action, which is incredibly hard to do, and it's making compromises here and there, and we're hitting, obviously, story material that is easier to work with than others. And so, yeah, sometimes we forget that point. But I'm sure there'll be more moments as we go on. We have a couple of scenes I want to do back to back. Let's see how the battle's going to go. Act 3, Scene 3. There's an alarum. Enter Titan, Lycaon, Enceladus, and Aegeon.
Saturn gives back and begins to leave the field.
Pursue him then into that place of strength which the proud Cretans hold impregnable.
This gygomantic cheer be eternized for our affright and terror. If they fly, toss rocks and tops of mountains after them to stumble them, or else entomb them quick.
They have already got into the town, and barricadoed against us their iron gates. What means, then, shall we find to startle them?
What but to spurn down their offensive mures, to shake in too their adamantine gates, their marble columns by the ground sills tear, and kick their ruined walls as high as heaven.
Pursue them to their gates, and about the city plant a strong siege. Now, Saturn, all my sufferances shall on thy head fall heavy. Will not spare, old man or babe. The Titans all things dare.
They exit Act 3, Scene 4. Alarum. Enter Saturn, Sibylla, Juno, and the lords of the Crete.
The heavens have, for our barbarous cruelty, done in the murder of our firstborn hops, poured on our head this vengeance. Where, oh, where shall we find rescue?
Patience, royal Saturn.
Bid wolves be mild and tigers pitiful. Command the Libyan lion's abstinence. Teach me to mollify the Corsic rock, or make the Mount Chimera passable. What monarch wrapped in my confusions can tell what patience means?
O royal father.
Oh, either teach me the rescue from these troubles, or bid me everlastingly, ever sink in despair and horror.
O my lord, you have from your own loins issued reserved, that may redeem all these calamities.
Issue from us?
From Saturn and Sibylla, that royal prince, king of Pelasgia, and famous Melliseus' foster child, whom all the world styles by the noble name of Jupiter. He is King Saturn's son.
Thou hast, Sibylla, kept that son alive, that only can redeem me from this thraldom. Oh, how shall we acquaint young Jupiter with this, his father's hard success in arms?
My care did ever these events foresee, and I have sent to your surviving son, to come unto your rescue. Then great Saturn, in your wife's pity, seemed to applaud the heavens, that make me their relentful minister in the repairing of your downcast state.
If royal Jupiter be Saturn's son, we shall be either rescued or revenged. And now I shall not dread those Titanoirs that threaten fire and steel.
Trust your Sibylla.
Thou art mine anchor, and the only column that supports Saturn's glory. O my Jupiter, on thee the basis of my hopes I erect, and in thy life King Saturn's fame survives. Are messengers dispatched to signify, my son, of our distress?
As far as Epire, where, as we understand, Jove now remains.
Then Titan and the proud Enceladus, Hyperion and Aegeon, with the rest of all the earth-bred race, we weigh you not, threaten your worst. Let all your eyes spark fire, your flaming nostrils like Avernus smoke, your tongues speak thunder, and your armed hands flying lightning. Be you gods above, or come you with infernal hatred armed, we dread you not. We have a son survives, shall calm your tempests. Beauteous Juno, comfort and cheer Sibylla. If he undertake our rescue, we from danger are secure. We in his valour all our lives assure.
And they exit. It's interesting, once again, we're not getting battle scenes, really. We're getting people running on, talking about they're being pursued, or we're going to set up a siege. Nobody's attempting to stage flying, tossing rocks and tops of mountains after people or anything. Just saying we might do. But yeah, we have a siege, we're trapped, and so we have to call on Jupiter. Send a message to Jupiter to bring him from the B plot to join the A plot. And we'll see how well that's going to go in a moment. So yeah, you get a sense of momentum and energy going on here. But again, still very few people coming on and off stage, actually. Potentially, of course, if you've got lots of bodies, you can fill it out. But, your primary speakers each time is only a handful. So, it's being very economical with how many people are on stage. That doesn't necessarily mean economical with how many actors you have. Lynn?
Yeah, I was just thinking that Saturn is an interesting character, interesting part. He's always complaining about the weight of responsibility of being king and how it's such a miserable job and oh, poor me. And then when his wife reveals that she has basically caused him to violate his oath and has preserved some of his sons alive, he doesn't do the diplomatic thing and say, okay, that's not cool. I have to go tell Titan the truth, and he and I'll work it out. And no, it's kind of like that's what he had always hoped would happen all along. It's like, oh, my sons lived, but it wasn't my doing, and now we're just going to kick my brother's ass, and my progeny will inherit. It's kind of like that was what he wanted all along. So yeah, he could be a really complicated character, I feel like.
It's also an interesting power shift as well with Sibylla here. Is once the cat is out of the bag, he's leaning very heavily on her. She's doing all the running here as to how do we get out of this mess. He's just going, what are we going to do? And she comes back with, oh well, I've already sent some, I've done some stuff. I sent some emails. It'll be. I've put in a expedited order with Amazon for this. It'll be fine. Briony.
I really like that. I like this dynamic between them and the respect that he's giving her, because he could have scapegoated her when he found out. He could have gone to Titan and said, "This is what she's done. We'll do something terrible to her as punishment. Maybe have the sons killed to make up for it all and whatnot." But he's stood by it, and I agree with Lynn that I do think it's because it's what he secretly wanted.
Yeah, and the problem is in itself its own solution. In that sense, Jupiter being alive has caused the war. Jupiter is the one who will solve the war. Alan, then Eric.
Yeah, interesting. She's actually not owned up to the other two sons as yet.
She did.
Not to Saturn.
She did.
But she's not invoked them in anything like the same way, has she?
Well, maybe they're not as famous fighters as Jupiter is, but she did say you have 3 sons alive.
Yep. Thou hast living 3 brave sons.
Right,
but where?
Apologies. Yeah.
In the last scene. Eric.
Well, I was going to say, in terms of like place that this is reminding me of, it's a bit all over the place. It reminds me both of Gorbadoc and sort of Solomon and Persida, which is a very weird mix if you think about it. But they're both. It's basically about sort of the inheritance of kingship, isn't it? Even if it's this whole like sort of, we have the drama with Calisto, which is very sort of dire. It's basically about who inherits and what do you do when you have multiple sons and that kind of thing, or even like when a father does not make a final decision on who is going to inherit.
I mean, I'm really interested that the similarities and differences with Edward IV at the moment. In the sense you've got this long narrative going on. And the way you're arranging that, whereas in Edward the Fourth, it was like the plot is happening off stage, whereas here you are actually getting the plot happening on stage. So there are interesting similarities and differences within the corpus. Any other thoughts before we continue with the action of Act 3? Eric again.
I was just going to say that it's interesting that it's the legal sons that are the problem, not sort of out of wedlock children, which is usually the problem with kings. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. There's still room for manoeuvre. Still 4.5 plays to go. Act 3, Scene 5. It's that man again. There might be some awkwardness ahead. Act 3, Scene 5. A flourish. Enter Jupiter and Melliseus with attendants.
Fair prince, for less by your deserts and honour you cannot be. Your fortunes and your birth are both unknown to me. My 2 fair daughters, as a swathed infant, brought you to my court, but whence or of what parents you proceed, I am merely ignorant.
Then am I nothing, and till I know whence my descent hath been, or from what house derived, I am but heir, and no essential substance of a man.
Enter Calisto, pursued by her young son Archas.
Help! Help! For heaven's sake, help! I am pursued, and by my son that seems to threat my life.
Stay that bold lad.
What's he? False Jupiter?
Calisto, or I much deceive myself.
Oh, thou most false, most treacherous and unkind. Behold, Calisto by her son pursued, indeed, thy son. This little savage youth hath lived mongst tigers, lions, wolves, and bears, and since his birth partakes their cruelty. Archas his name. Since I Diana left, and from her chaste train was divorced, this youth I childed in a cave remote and silent. His nurture was amongst the savages. This day I, by misfortune, moved his spleen, and he pursued me with revenge and fury, and had I not forsook the shades and forests and fled for rescue to these walled towns, he had slain me in his fury. Save me then, let not the son the mother sacrifice before the father's eye.
Archas, my son, my young son, Archas, Jupiter's firstborn, oh, let me hug thee, and 1,000 times embrace thee in my arms. Lycaon's grandchild, Callisto's son. Oh, will you, beauteous lady, forsake the forests and yet live with us?
No, thou false man. For thy perjurious lusts I have abandoned human subtleties. There, take thy son, and use him like a prince, being son unto a princess. Teach him arts and honored arms. For me, I have abjured all peopled cities, and betook myself to solitary deserts. Jove, adieu. Thou proving false, no mortal can be true.
Exit Callisto.
She will needs be gone, be pleased then. Wearied with beasts, I long to live mongst men.
Yet stay, Callisto. Why wilt thou outrun thy Jupiter? She's gone. Welcome, my son, my dear son Archas, whom if fortune smile, I will create lord of a greater style.
Enter the clown with letters.
Save you, sir. Is your name King Melliseus?
We are Melliseus and the Empire King.
Then this letter is for you. But is there not one here in your court called, let me see, have you never a gibbet maker?
Sirrah, here's one called Jupiter.
Aye, Jupiter, that is he I would speak with. Here's another letter to you. But, read it. Pray, let me ask you one question.
What's that?
Whether you be a wise child or no.
Your reason?
Because I would know whether you know your own father. But if you do not, hoping you are in good health, as your father scarce was at the making hereof, these are to certify you.
News of a father? Never could such tidings have glutted me with gladness.
And he reads,
For mine own part, though I know not what belongs to the getting of children, yet I know how to father a child. And because I would be loath to have this parish troubled with you, I bring you news where you were born. I was the man that laid you at this man's door, and if you will not go home quietly, you shall be sent from constable to constable till you come to the place where you were begot. Read further and tell me more.
Sorry, I disappeared for a second there. Is Jupiter then mighty Saturn's son?
Him the son of Saturn? King of Crete? My father, battled by the Titanois. May all my hope toward hopes die in my birth, nor ever let me worthily inherit the name of royalty, if by my valour I prove me not descended royally.
I was the man that took pains with you. 'Twas I that brought you in the hand-basket.
Should I have wished a father in the world, it had been Saturn, or a royal mother, it had been fair Sibylla, queen of Crete. Great Epirus, king, peruse these tragic lines, and in thy wonted bounty grant supplies to free my noble father.
Jupiter, as I am Melliseus, Empire's king, thou shalt have free assistance.
Come, then, assemble all the powers that we can levy. Archas, we make thee of Pelasgia king, as King Lycaon's grandchild and the son of fair Calisto. Let that clime henceforth be called Arcadia, and usurp thy name. Go then, and press the Arcadians to the rescue of royal Saturn. This great king and I will lead the Epirians. Fail me not to meet to redeem Saturn and to rescue Crete.
Exit, leaving the clown behind.
I've no mind to this buffeting. I'll walk after, fair and softly, in hope that all the buffeting may be done before I come. Whether I had better go home by land or sea? If I go by land and miscarry, then I go by the way of all flesh. If I go by sea and miscarry, then I go the way of all fish. I'm not yet resolved. But howsoever, I have done my message so cleanly, they cannot say the messenger is bereaved of anything that belongs to his message.
Exit clown. And as everyone has said in the chat, a hand basket. Yes. Such a forced pun there from the clown. It's like, can we make something vaguely pun with Jupiter? It's like he's not even trying to make the joke work. Is that the shtick of this clown? That the jokes demonstrably don't actually work? I mean, it's something... Because otherwise, some of the clown stuff is actually quite nicely written. I'm quite liking the general shape of some of it. But when he makes a joke, it's just you can see... Hang on, just going to crank it up a bit. And... there we go. Off it goes. Yeah, lots of things happening in this scene. Jupiter gains a son. in the way that most long-running American series characters usually do around about season 5, 6. It's just randomly just throw something into the mix. And yeah, doing strange things with myth. And you know, he gains a son and immediately gives them a kingdom. You know, it's like overcompensating parenting thing. I don't know if there's something going on there. Briony.
I found this last little bit from Jupiter really interesting. So he's just made his son, who he knows barely anything about, apart from the fact that he's so savage he's tried to kill his own mother and only guardian. He's just made him king of Pelasgia, but also, while we're at it, let's change the name of Pelasgia and all the people that live there so that it matches your name, and then obviously they'll be more than happy to go to war for you. What?
Yeah, that's myth logic. That's myth logic. Aliki.
Yeah, that bit is part of the myth. I mean, it doesn't quite work out like that, but there is still a place on the Peloponnese in Greece called Arcadia, and it's called after Archas. But the story about his mother is completely different in the myth, and he has a good reason for trying to kill her. She's a bear.
Yeah. I mean, that whole sequence, I was just sitting there going, huh? I was getting very confused. I mean, it's an interesting shift, and I think dramatically it sort of makes sense. But it does seem to be a deliberate from the author there. But we get to see Calisto again. Calisto gets to tell Jupiter where to go. I mean, there's some thoughts from the room. Helen, then Briony.
Two small points. The clown doesn't get his tip. And nobody takes any personal notice of him at all. He keeps on saying, I was the man who took pains with you. He even, as you say, mentions the hand basket. But nevertheless, nobody takes any notice of anything he says, apart from taking the letters from him. So, I mean, I can quite see that throughout that scene, he would have his hand out and not get anything. The other thing is that I was once driving north through the Peloponnese. I forget what I was looking for, but I was driving north, and suddenly there was this road sign which said in Greek, but I could understand it, "You are now entering Arcadia." And you know, the scenery did improve.
I think that's a really good point about the clown. But yeah, nobody talks to the clown, do they? But, you know, apart from that very opening address, you know, when it, you know, the moment he's made the bad pun, it's basically like, and I'm just going to read the letter, and he's just talking at me. Lois.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's worth saying that I was picking up on what Helen said, but the one time I was in Greece, I remember we were on a coach and someone said, you know, we are now in a part of Greece that is called Arcadia. And I just about freaked out. I mean, I've read so much literature about Arcadia and the beauty of this mythical world and so on. And just the fact that it could be mentioned so casually.
Briony, sorry, I forgot to go to you then, Lynn.
Right. Even though it's only come out of this bastardization of myth, I really like the idea that this rape child is a nasty, savage, you know, as if almost like because he's got the badness of his dad and then the way he was begotten as well. I like that it's got a nice sense of something about it.
Lynn.
Yeah, the clown and the fact that people don't actually seem to engage with him at all. It's because he's from a different play. Yeah, he's an early modern clown, and then this is in the middle of this sort of semi-mythical world. He doesn't really fit, I don't think. So yeah, no wonder people don't notice him. He's from a different play.
He's from a different production entirely, you know. He's supposed to be in Cinderella around in the other theatre across the road. Eric.
I was just going to mention that it's interesting how there are so many like sort of echoes to what's happened, but also like sort of foreshadowing for myths that we know are going to come, like, you know, the whole Troy thing. You know, Agamemnon slaughtering all that stuff. It's very sort of, there's a lot of mentions of, you know, Like if you change Calisto to sort of Hecuba or some other name, or I don't know, even Helen, for example, it still works.
Yeah, I mean that's the nature of myth, is that effectively it's reworking the same problems again and again and again in slightly different ways. And yeah, what also then happens when you try to string them together into a narrative is you can then call it foreshadowing, and rather than just repetition, which the sprinkling on the wafer thin veneer of depth. Any other thoughts before we move on? Okay, we're going into Act 3, Scene 6, actually. We have 2 Scene 7s in our scripts, just a note. There is an alarum. Enter Titan, Lycaon, and Enceladus, with Saturn, Juno, and Sibylla prisoners. So a lot has happened.
Down, treacherous lord, and be our foot pace now to ascend our high tribunal. Where's that godhead with which the people ave thee to heaven?
'Tis sunk into the deep abysm of hell. Tear from his head the golden wreath of Crete. Tread on his captive bulk, and with thy weight, great Titan, sink him to the infernal shades, so low that with his trunk his memory may be extinct in Lethe.
More than tyrannous, to triumph o'er the weak and to oppress the low dejected. Let your cruelty be the sad period of my wretchedness. Only preserve my lovely Juno's life, and give Sibylla freedom.
By these gods we neither fear nor value, but contend to equal in our actions. Both shall die. There shall no proud Saturnian live, to brave the meanest of the high-born Titanoirs.
Raise from the earth their hateful memory, and let the blood of Titans sway the earth. Speak, are the ports and confines strongly armed against all invasions?
Who dares damage us? Let all the passages be open left. Unguarded let our ports and havens lie. All danger we despise. Mischance or dread we hold in base contempt.
Conquest is ours, maugre divine or base terrestrial powers.
There's an alarum. Enter Aegeon.
Arm, royal Titan, arm, Enceladus. A pale of brandished steel hath girt thy land. From the earth's caverns break infernal fires, to make thy villages and hamlets burn. Tempestuous ruin in the shape of war clouds all thy populous kingdom. At my heels confusion dogs me, and the voice of death still thunders in mine ears.
Is it possible? Bear Saturn first to prison. We'll after parley them.
Come, angels armed or devils clad in flames, our fury shall repel them. Come they girt with power celestial or infernal rage. We'll stand their fierce opposure, royal Titan. Aegeon and Hyperion, don your arms. Bravely advance your strong orbicular shields, and in your right hand brandish your bright steel. Drown your affrightments in the amazed sounds of martial thunder, dire passioned deep. We'll stand them, be they gods, if men expel their strengthless force and stound them low as hell.
There's a flourish. Enter marching King Melliseus, Jupiter, Archas, drum and soldiers.
Whence are you that intrude on our confines, or what portend you in these hostile sounds of clamorous war?
Titan's destruction with all the ruin of his giant race.
By what pretense or claim?
In right of Saturn, whom against the law that Titans have deposed.
What art thou that speakest it?
I am Jupiter, King Saturn's son, immediate heir to Crete.
There, pause. That word disturbs all thy claim, and proves that Titan seats him in his own.
If Saturn, as thou sayest, has sons alive, his oath is broken, and we are justly seized. of Greta's crown by his late forfeiture.
Thy tongue hath spoke thy own destruction, since whom King Saturn spared our swords must kill, and he is come to offer up that life which hath so long been forfeit.
Tyrants? No. The heavens preserved me for a farther use, to plague your offspring that afflict the earth, and with your threatenings spurn against the gods.
And Helen Lycaon.
I'm sorry. Now shalt thou pay me for Callisto's wrong, exiling me and for dishonouring her.
Are you there, cannibal, man-eating wolf? Lycaon, thou art much beholding to me. I womaned first, Calisto, and made thee a grandfather. Dost not thank me for't. See, here's the boy. This is Arcadia's king, no more Pelasgia now, since thy exile.
To thee that stylest thyself King Saturn's son, know thou wast doomed before thy birth to die, thy claim disabled, and in saving thee thy father hath made forfeit of his crown.
No, tyrant, I was born free as my father, nor had he power to take that life away that the gods freely gave me. Tyrants, see, here is that life you by indenture claim, seize it and take it. But before I fall, death and destruction shall confound you all.
Destruction is our vassal and attends upon the threatening of our stormy brows. We trifle ours, arm all your fronts with horror, your hearts with fury, and your hands with death. Thunder meets thunder, tempests storms defy, Saturn and all his issue this day die.
Alarum, battles joined, Titan is slain and his party repulsed. Enter Aegeon.
Where's now the high and proud Enceladus to stop the fury of the adverse foe, or stay the base flight of our dastard troops? Titan is slain, Hyperion strews the earth, and thousands by the hands of Jupiter are sent into black darkness. All that stand sink in the weight of his high jovial hand, to shun whose rage. Aegeon, thou must fly. Crete, with our hoped conquests, all adieu. We must propose new quests, since Saturn's son hath by his puissance all our camp o'errun.
And they exit, or he exits rather. It's quite a busy old scene. We finally get some actual fighting. Battle scene, someone dies, lengthy fight sequence for Titan. Interesting question of scale. You know, we've got giants. How are these giants? Now I'm starting to think practically. There are opportunities here to say because they're not really been very often in the same scene, and I'm just wondering whether there should be some way of making them physically bigger. Whereas Saturn's kin are just more powerful, and just can have magic fighty moves. I quite like at the beginning of the scene, you got one of them just going, "We don't need defences, we have conquered everything," and then immediately someone comes in, "We need defences," and stuff. So yeah, so we have these reversals. We have the capture of Saturn, and then Jupiter turns up in the nick of time to save things, and some stuff goes on. So yeah, thoughts from the room about this. Because it's a bit tricky when the narrative is now, of course, pushing us that Jupiter saves the day. It's Jupiter. Bit hard. Helen, then Lois.
I'm very interested in the responsibility of Saturn for the survival of his sons, because in our sense, we would say he did his best not to commit a breach of his oath, and it wasn't at all his fault, and he didn't know he'd breached his oath, and he shouldn't be held responsible for it. But in the idea of intent is a fairly recent one in law. I mean, I'm talking over the millennia. And in fact, the fact that he didn't succeed in killing his sons makes him guilty, even though he intended to do the right thing. And it's rather the same with the victims of rape, that although they had no intention to be unfaithful to whatever vow or husband they may have had, the fact of it happening meant that it was on them. Interesting to me, not to anyone else, but to me.
No, we're building context here. Lois.
Yeah, I mean, it's the story of Oedipus, isn't it? Who had no intention of doing all the horrible things that he did because he didn't know who he was when he did them. Yeah, I was thinking about these giants. I mean, it seems to me half the cast are going to have to be on stilts, or else there's going to have to be something with puppets. I don't know.
This is speaking to me as an opportunity, not a burden. Briony, then Eric. Oh, no, nothing from Briony. Eric.
Well, I was going to say it's very much the sort of countdown / final battle in what do you call it, superhero film, where you've got like King Kong against like these tiny humans, but the humans are faster because they don't have to worry about like, you know, size and stuff. Whereas King Kong takes forever to swing because he's huge. Yeah, and it's kind of, I don't know, it is very much that, I'm guessing, in this kind of context. And you could, I was thinking more shadow theater, where you have them like sort of the difference between like them is sort of, yeah, behind the, like behind sort of some sort of sheet or something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All of the things are in play here. I think all of the storytelling techniques are available as well, because we have Homer, so it is inviting that kind of intervention. And we got dumb shows. I mean, so we already have dumb shows, and we could almost say the battle scenes almost function on that same level as well. I mean, it's our first relatively crowded scene, actually. You know, there's about 10 people on stage at the same time, which we haven't really technically had, I think, so far. I could be wrong on that point. You know, not including random attendance. Rachael, because I never do. Some people do. They don't count. Seriously. Sorry. They might have an equity card and everything, but I'm sorry. That in my no. Anyway, sorry, Rachael.
No, I was just gonna say maybe the size of the cast and the doubling of this. Maybe there was a lot of doubling involved. And that's why the scenes are kept smaller, or, you know, the characters in the scenes are kept smaller. So then when you have this battle scene, you can have, you know, a relatively few amount of people on stage while making it seem, well, it's seeming bigger in comparison to other scenes.
Yes, there's no point having a pitch battle if your whole film is made up of pitch battles. You know, you want still points and, you know, want to build to the big climax. Otherwise, the climax isn't much of a climax. I'm not suggesting this is in any way a criticism of most action films now. Anyway, but yeah, if you're going to build to this moment in Act 3, and we're not quite at the end yet, there is more action to come. A certain escalation is nice and logical. Eric.
It's interesting how they don't do the whole, I don't know, like sort of in Battle of Alcazar or how do you call it, first part of Hieronymo, where you've got that sort of naming where it's like, you know, I don't know, sort of Enceladus, Aegeon, I'm gonna kick your ass kind of thing. They don't do that, which is quite interesting.
No, I mean they do a bit of sledging, but not in that way. Yeah, they just basically sort out who Jupiter is, and then sort of get on with it. Anyway, we need to move on. We've got a couple of scenes left to do this session. Act 3, Scene 7. And more alarm, so the fighting's all over just because the Aegeon has run away in that little mini scene since Titan was slain. Doesn't mean the battle's actually over. We're still mid-action. Alarum, enter Enceladus leading his army. Jupiter leading his 2 armies, people. They make a stand.
None stir. Be all your arms cramped and diseased, your swords unuseful. May all your steely glaives command your hands, and not your sinews them, till I by single valour have subdued this murderer of my father.
Here he stands that must for death have honour at thy hands. None interrupt us. Singly we'll contend, and twixt us two give these rude factions end.
2 royal armies then on both sides stand, to view this strange and dreadful monomachy. Thy fall, Saturnian, adds to my renown, for by thy death I gain the Cretan crown.
Death is thy due, I find it in thy stars, whilst our high name gives period to these wars.
Alarum, they combat with javelins first, after with swords and targets. Jupiter kills Enceladus and enters with victory. Jupiter, Saturn, Sibylla, Juno, Melliseus, Archas with the lords of Crete.
Never was Saturn deified till now, nor found that perfectness the gods enjoy. Heaven can assure no greater happiness than I attain in sight of Jupiter.
O my dear son, born with my painful throes, and with the hazard of my life preserved, how well hast thou acquitted all my travails, in this thy last and famous victory.
This tells me that yon royal king of Crete my father is, and that renowned queen my mother. All which proves by circumstance that 'tis but duty that by me's achieved. Only yon beauteous lady stands apart. I know not how to style.
'Tis Juno and thy sister.
Oh, my stars, you seek to make immortal Jupiter.
Juno is only happy in the fortunes of her renowned brother.
Royal Saturn, if ever I deserved well as a victor, or if my warlike deeds, yet leading new, and perfect, both in eyes and memory, may plead for me, or if I may obtain as one that merits, or entreat of you as one that owes, I being titled now your son, let me espouse fair Juno. And bright lady, let me exchange the name of sister with you, and style you by a nearer name of wife. Will be my spouse, fair Juno.
This is a name I prize above sister, if these grace were the same.
'Tis it, I'll deny my Jupiter. She is my own. I'll royalize thy nuptials with all the solemn triumphs Crete can yield.
Empire shall add to these solemnities, and with a bounteous hand support these triumphs.
So all Arcadia shall.
Then to our palace pass on in state. Let all the deities shower down from heaven a largesse, that these bridals may exceed mortal pomp. March, march, and leave me to contemplate these joys, and to devise how with best state this night to solemnize.
They all march off and leave Saturn alone.
Saturn at length is happy by his son, whose matchless and unrivaled dignities are without peer on earth. Oh joy, joy, corsive, worse than the throes of childbirth, or the tortures of black Cimmerian darkness. Saturn, now bethink thee of the Delphian oracle. He shall his father's virtues first excel, seize Crete, and after drive him down to hell. The first is past, my virtues are exceeded. The last I will prevent by force or treason. I'll work his ruin ere he grows too high. His stars have cast it, and the boy shall die. More sons I have, more crowns I cannot win. The gods say he must die, and 'tis no sin.
Exit Saturn. This wasn't the land of hope and golden. This wasn't the golden age that Saturn, I think, had in mind at the beginning of this play. starting to feel that the golden age is starting to land with greater and greater levels of irony as we go on. We have a grudge match after the big battle. We get the 1-to-1 grudge match between Jupiter, and it's a complicated, ongoing stage fight with levels and detail that we're getting hints at here, and then we get some incest. Yay! Everyone's cool with the incest. Nobody goes. They're all basically going, yeah, you can have it at our place. It'll be fine. We'll do the catering. Yeah, that's Greek mythology for you people. Anyone want to leap in on this one? Just keeps getting better, eh? Aliki.
As you said, that's Greek mythology. Juno is Jupiter's sister, and there's not much you can do about that. I'm a bit hesitant about Golden Age, because I don't think Golden Age in Greek mythology meant what we think it means today. I think it just means the days when the gods were up and about and doing stuff, rather than a particularly peaceful or wonderful time.
Lynn.
Yeah, the whole, is it Greek myth or isn't it thing? What I've noticed here in this scene and in the scene where Jupiter assaults Calisto is that, it's one thing when you have a myth about gods, immortals who are accountable to no one and controllable by no one, running around marrying their sisters and assaulting virgins all the time. The way that anyway, I respond to that is very different than when we make those characters human. It's so much more disturbing in this retelling when Jupiter isn't really cast as an immortal. He talks about the gods as being somebody else who are controlling his fate. He's evidently not the king of heaven in this retelling, and it just makes the story just much more disturbing. You have that kind of distance when it's gods doing all this horrible stuff, and when you retell it so that the actions are performed by humans, it's quite disturbing, I think.
Eric.
It's interesting how this isn't sort of the one-on-one grudge match to end the war sort of thing, because it's not sort of let's kill each other, let's fight each other to sort of so that no one else dies. It's more like kind of you're the ultimate obstacle to me being king kind of thing, which is an interesting thing. Also, I made a note about how I don't know how accurate this was, because I have notes on a teeny tiny post-it anyway. Just sort of the sister-brother relationship, wasn't that also kind of true of royal families of the time, where they kind of didn't want the purity of the blood to go to waste?
Yep.
Yes, to greater or lesser degrees, depending on the dynasty and the context. Yes, interbreeding is available as a way of maintaining concepts of purity and line. Helen.
Yeah, it's most visible in the Habsburgs, where they were marrying their nieces backwards and forwards for quite a few generations, which resulted in people with chins where they couldn't chew because their mouths wouldn't shut properly. But they were relying on a papal dispensation to overcome the laws of nature.
Okay, we Rachael, and then we're going to just do our final bit of the session as we transfer to the next unit of action, as we might call it. We're sort of making sure that we sort of step into the next story or midway. Rachael, did you have anything?
No, I put it in the chat. Yes, I do. The House of Valois, I think, actually married siblings together, and eventually they got so sick that they just died out, I think.
I don't know about siblings, but yeah, the Valois were kind of notoriously weak and sickly by the time that line was extinguished. I think because cousin marriages. Everyone was like their own cousin in European royal households, because families, because yeah.
I feel like we've gone down a tangent that we can hold on. Very briefly, Eric.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna. This is not me complaining about the amount of lines I've got, but it's just like it's interesting how Juno doesn't say very much, whereas all the other women in the play have up to this point.
Well, so far she hasn't had a primary driving role. I suspect that might shift slightly. We shall see. Okay, so we have the sort of in-betweeny sceney moment from Homer before we go into Act 4, Scene 1. We'll run that all together before we close. So enter Homer.
O blind ambition and desire of reign, what horrid mischief wilt thou not devise? The appetite of rule and thirst of reign besot the foolish and corrupt the wise. Behold a king, suspicious of his son, pursues his innocent life, and without cause. O blind ambition, what hast thou not done? Against religion, zeal, and nature's laws, but men are born their own fates to pursue. Gods will be gods, and Saturn finds it true.
A dumb show. Enter Jupiter, Juno, Melliseus, Archas as two rebels. To them Saturn, who draws his sword to kill Jupiter, who only defends himself, but being hotly pursued, draws his sword, beats away Saturn, seizeth his crown, and swears all the lords of Crete to his obeisance, and so exit.
Saturn against his son his force extended, and would have slain him by his tyrannous hand, while Jupiter alone his life defended. But when no prayers his fury could withstand, he used his force. His father drove from Crete, and as the oracle before had told, usurped the crown. The lords kneel at his feet, and Saturn's fortunes are to exile sold. But leaving him, of Danae, that bright lass, how amorous Jove first wrought her to his power, how she was closed in a force of brass, and how he scaled it in a golden shower. Of these we next must speak, courteous and wise. Help with your hands, for Homer wants his eyes.
Exit Homer. Act 4, Scene 1. There's a flourish. Enter Jupiter, Juno, the lords of Crete, Melliseus, Archas, Neptune, and Pluto.
Our unkind father, double tyrannous to prosecute the virtues of his son, hath sought his own fate, and by his ingratitude left to our head the imperial wreath of Crete, which gladly we receive. Neptune from Athens and Pluto from the lower Tartary, both welcome to the Cretan Jupiter. Those stars that governed our nativity and stripped our fortunes from the hand of death shall guard us and maintain us.
Noble Saturn, famous in all things and degenerate only in that inhuman practice against his sons, is fled us, whom we came to visit freely and filial duties to express. Great Athens, the nurse and fosteress of my infancy, I have instructed in the seaman's craft and taught them truly how to sail by stars. Besides, the unruly jennet I have tamed and trained him to the saddle for my practice. The horse to me is solely consecrate.
I, from the bounds of lower Tartary, have travelled to the fertile plains of Crete. Now am I less in lustre of my fame than Neptune or renowned Jupiter. Those barren kingdoms I have enriched with spoils, and not a people traffics in those worlds for wealth or treasure, but we custom them, and they enrich our coffers. Our armed guards prey on their camels and their laden mules, and Pluto's through the world renowned and feared. And since we missed of Saturn lately fled, it glads me yet I freely may survey the honors of my brother Jupiter.
And beauteous Juno, empress of all hearts, whom Neptune thus embraceth.
So doth Pluto.
All divine honors crown the royal temples of my two famous brothers.
King Melliseus, welcome them to Crete. Arenas, do you the like?
Princes, your hands.
You are my royal uncles.
Nay, hand him, lords, he is your kinsman too. Archas, my son, of fair Calisto born. I hope, fair Juno, it offends not you, it was before your time.
He was a strumpet.
She shall be a star, and all the queens and beauteous maids on earth that are renowned for high perfections will woo and win. We were born to sway and rule, nor shall the name of wife be curbed to us, or snaffle in our pleasures. Beauteous Io and fair Europa have, by our trans shapes and guiles of love, already been deflowered. Nor lives she that is worthy of our desires, but we can charm with courtship. Royal brothers, what news of note is rumored in those realms through which you made your travels?
Have you heard of great Acrisius, the brave Argos king, and of his daughter, Danae?
His renown and her fair beauty oft have pierced our ears, nor can we be at peace till we behold that face fame hath so blazed on. What of her?
Of her enclosure in the Darined tower, girt with a triple mure of shining brass. Have you not heard?
But we desire it highly. What marble wall or adamantine gate? What fort of steel or castle forged from brass love cannot scale, or beauty not break through? Discourse the novel, Neptune.
Thus it was. The Queen of Argos, growing great, the king sends, as the custom is, to the oracle to know what fortunes shall betide the babe. Answers returned by Phoebus and his priests. The queen shall child a daughter beautiful, who, when she grows to years, shall then bring forth a valiant princely boy. Yet such a one that shall the king, his grandsire, turn to stone. Danae is born, and as she grows to ripeness, so grew her father's fear. And to prevent his ominous fate pronounced by the oracle, he molds this brazen tower, impregnable both for the seat and guard, yet beautiful as is the gorgeous palace of the sun.
Ill doth Acrisius to contend and war against the unchanging fates. I'll scale that tower, or rain down millions in a golden shower. I long to be the father of that babe begot on Danae, that shall prove so brave and turn the dotard to his marble grave. 'Tis cast already. Fate, be thou my guide, whilst for this amorous journey I provide.
But is the lady there immured and closed from all society and sight of man?
Oh, so full of jealous fears is King Acrisius, that save himself no man must near the fort. Only a guard of beldams past their lusts, insensible of love or amorous pity, partly by bribes hired, partly curbed with threats, are guard unto this bright imprisoned dame.
Too pitiless and too outdoors the king, to cloister beauty from the sight of man. But this concerns us not us.
That fort I'll scale, though in attempting it be death to fail. Brothers and princes, all our court's rarities lie open to your royalist entertainment, yet, pardon me, since urgence calls me hence to an enforced absence. Nay, Queen Juno, you must be pleased, the cause imports us highly. Feast with these princes till our free return. Attendants, lords, we must ascend in gold on yon prisoned beauty ne'er behold.
And thus ends the scene, and once again we end the session with a setup for a series of scenes that we're probably not going to have much fun to open the next session with. Who wants to react to this? Go to Briony first.
I just hope Jupiter gets a really nasty accident soon.
Yeah, I mean, he does say, you know, he could fall, you know, fail to scale the fort, so it could all go, you know, horribly wrong. Don't think that's where the narrative is going to go, but you know, let's hope. Let's hope.
I feel
Eric,
like maybe he's been doubling with the Marquis from Patient Grizzle. Just like he's getting worse and worse. Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like that. Yeah.
And it's so blatant as well. You know, they've had this lengthy discussion with Juno in the room, and then at the end goes, "Nay, Queen Juno, you must be," you know, and you know, and it's like you're not even trying to hide your intentions here at all. Quite apart from the bit earlier with about where Archas came from, which was just not awkward at all. We've had this power struggle where apparently gods will be gods. That's not a triggering phrase at all. And where Saturn has been driven out in Dumb Show again, and you get the winner rewriting history to a slight degree at the beginning of the scene, I think. Other thoughts, Lois?
There's a weird inconsistency, really. I mean, there is that idea of the Golden Age as being this great period of free love where everybody just did what they liked, you know, as I think I mentioned last time. But on the other hand, if that were the case, you wouldn't get Juno describing Calisto as a strumpet, you know, and you know, you just wouldn't you wouldn't get that sense of the horror of what's happened. But I think Heywood must be essentially trying to give the audience this sense of estrangement. I mean, good heavens, you know, could people really behave like that? Because it's just so completely weird, and it's to the point of being comic, really.
Yeah, Rachael.
No, we were because the chat is talking so much about Juno and stuff about her. Is that him having this son, if she has children with Jupiter, that he might be a challenge for this throne, and also what do you call it? Whether or not divorce is possible, you know. I know before it's been pointed out that in the UK at this time it was pretty hard to get one unless you were, you know, like royalty or something. But like, if in this fictional thing divorce is possible, and it's only if Jupiter decides, that, you know, she could really face abandonment from his affairs, and it could be a real challenge to her position and her children's positions, or that she could be abandoned. And then also a question about, you know, a historical question for the UK at the time. Was abandonment, would that happen to women? Would that be something that would happen to them? Yeah. And how would women relate to this, I guess, to this scene?
Anyone want to leap in on that question, Helen?
Petitions to various bodies, like the Privy Council, are stuffed with women claiming to have been abandoned. Very occasionally, you will get a man claiming that his wife has run off, but much more often it's women complaining about that they've been abandoned. There's a lot of it about.
I just want to keep the focus on the play rather than necessarily other things. I apologise. It is interesting, and I hate to curb it, but I just want to stay on topic. Briony, then Eric.
It's sort of on that, but not. I'm just wondering, would that not be the only bonus of her having had to marry her brother? That even without him, she's still kind of somebody.
Yeah, she's a very high status person, you know, in that sense. Absolutely. Eric?
I was going to say, just talk about like how we would stage this, or how they would stage this. I don't know, just because I keep seeing like Homer being outside of the narrative, and I keep imagining him being on a balcony, like sort of separate from the action kind of thing. I don't know, just because it's so like he has ultimate knowledge of the whole like action so to speak, and how it's going to turn out and stuff. I don't know. That's just an interesting thing that struck me during the previous speech.
Well, it's interesting to think the way Homer's sort of landing for me as contemplating performance today is that we've got a narrative being told by a bloke, and this is the narrative that we're getting. And at the beginning of the play, it largely seemed that Homer's saying, "I've made all this stuff up. It's not I'm reporting it," and you're going, "Well, this is what's coming out of the male imagination here." And that might be useful, and it might also be really, really, really bad for trying to do things with this text. I'm still not really sure where to land with this yet. Lois.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is whenever you've got a character like Homer who just appears very briefly and then vanishes for long stretches of time, the obvious idea is to double him with somebody. And then the question is, what would you do with him? In fact, which of these roles would fit? I mean, none of them really.
Yes, I mean, there's presumably a logistics point that we could actually look and see what the most likely candidate. But he could also spin on a sixpence. I would have thought, because he could be only half in costume. Look, I'm still Homer, kind of way. Alan.
I think actually Homer probably doubles up on a number of the bit parts. The messengers, random lords with single lines and so on.
There aren't as many bit parts as
but there's a few odds and sods in there of people who sort of come on very briefly, usually only the once, and that would seem to be a sensible way of doing it because it would not require a massive costume change or anything like that. Change a cloak, job done.
Yeah, because he's got the dumb shows happening during his dialogue as well. So there's an awful lot of characters who interact with him on stage. So it's harder than you'd think. Helen, then Eric.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that there is the problem of the dumb show because no one in a dumb show, and that's most of the big parts, can double with Homer. An exception is the clown.
That's a possibility, isn't it?
Yeah, we can look into that. Eric, then Lynn.
I was going to say in a modern performance, you can just have a voiceover in the recording, but I mean, because you don't really need, you need that part, like sort of to narrate while something is happening.
Well, it's the kind of part in a modern production where you could turn it on a sixpence quite a lot. And, sometimes we think that, in the past they weren't as dynamic and clever and with their doubling schemes. But maybe they were. So it did, or masks. Who knows? Maybe masks. Mask is always a get out because then you can have lots of actors playing the same part and just hope for the best. Because you're making it clear who it's supposed to be, even if it's not literally the same person. Lynn.
Yeah, I thought I saw. I thought I remembered a scene that begins with the clown, so that Homer and the clown would be problematic to double them because he has 0 time to change. But before that, I was sort of just thinking about. I'm wondering what's happening with. Does Saturn show up again, or is he just sort of exiled from the world of the play? Because Juno's in a weird position. Saturn is her father, with whom she has grown up. She has an actual bond with him. They have a little scene together. Don't be sad, you still have me. But she's also now married to her brother, who is also her father. So, and then there's a conflict between her spouse on the one side and her father on the other. Man, she's not in an enviable position.
And we get basically that in dumb show. We don't get that in the action. Again, that choice between what is going to be the act unit of action and the dumb show and what moves, and just that constant looking over your shoulder that these plays present, which is just which bit are we on now? Oh right, okay, next. There's a surface quality to what's going on here, which is perhaps again an advantage and a disadvantage. Because you're always just moving on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Do you get emotionally attached with anyone? It's probably quite useful that we don't get necessarily emotionally engaged with Jupiter a lot of the time, because what do you do with a character like Jupiter? What do we do with a character like Jupiter, beyond constantly point out that he's a git? Other thoughts? I'm not going to go around for final thoughts, so it'll be a free-for-all for anyone who has things to throw in at this stage. Again, still trying to get a grip on what these plays are doing. Eric?
Well, since we were talking about like plays that it's similar to and stuff, as we said, Battle of Alcazar, all that stuff. But then like another one that comes out of the woodworks is the Wars of Cyrus and Promus and Cassandra, which were equally kind of problematic. Maybe not like to the level of, incest, obviously, but it was kind of that level of like the female characters didn't have much agency, but when they did act, they had like sort of quite, especially in Wars of Cyrus, where you had that switch between Alexandra and Limanio, and then you had Panthea doing like all the sort of, I love my husband who is about to die, basically. I don't know, it's just an interesting sort of thing. And the whole Promos and Cassandra where, you had the switch sort of, not switch, but sort of, oh, of course I will marry you after, you have sex with me. Of course, and like your honor won't be stained at all. And then, that doesn't happen. Or, well, it does, but we're not really happy with that, if I remember correctly.
Other thoughts from the room before we close the session this afternoon? We're 2/3 of the way through the text. In terms of structure, it's very clear what it's doing. Each act seems to be a unit of action, some exposition to move us on to the next unit of action. But are we getting a sense of what the flow of, where's the end point, of course, what's going to be Act 5, and what is, are we going to detect, shall we say, a thesis behind the text? Are we able to do that? Does anyone have any closing thoughts before we close the session? Rachael?
I don't know if this doesn't really have anything to do with performance, but this is like I don't know, so much of that has to do with Calisto and with Juno and with Vesta that it reminds me of that. Was it one of the Townley plays, or was it one of the York plays towards the end with Mary with all the women, all the nuns, when she had joined like a nunnery or something like that? That it's a very, you could display like the way we've been talking in the chat, that there's this discussion, so much discussion about women's positions in this and like what their recourses were. And I mean, it's something very interesting about, I guess women's history of like what their power was, or how equality changes through the ages,
there's an interesting question, of course, but about when would you set this, because parts of it feel like it's set, in the then modern, early modern times, and then bits of it seem to have a logic of almost a medieval logic, and then obviously actual classical stuff. So there's an interesting logic there, actually, for a modern staging about what universe you're actually, what age you're setting this age in, which then overlaps with those questions about what that society at that time is saying, as well as what the play world is, and etc. There's a whole series of overlapping things that might come into play there. Eric?
I was going to say the Parnassus universe, because they actually, like, in the Return from Parnassus, you had that whole thing of, like, sort of, it's basically like a sort of, not quite a mythological one, but then it was basically talking about all these poets and things that were going on at the time, but threaded together by a very, very, not very smart well, no, it was a fun narrative as far as I can remember, but it was kind of like, it didn't really have a plot. It was just like, hey, people we meet on the road.
Yeah. Other thoughts? Lois?
Yeah, I sort of see this as people in Jacobean costume with the drapery over them, apart from the clown, who probably ought to be just dressed like a Jacobean peasant. But I would have thought the purpose of it really was kind of to refresh everybody's memories about all the Greek legends that they sort of vaguely remembered reading when they were in school or thought they ought to know about. I mean, it works quite well as just sort of reminding you of all these things.
Yeah, is it a warning? This is how bad the pagan world was, people. Or these terrible things happen, or is it to say that these things still happen now, but in slightly different ways? I'm just throwing thoughts. Any more, Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, I've been wondering about that. Is this supposed to be speaking to the modern world? Because when this was published in 1611, King James I of England, VI of Scotland, did have 2 sons still. Henry had not. Henry would die the following year. So, I mean, is it really stretching it to see that to say that there is a hint of a modern parallel or a contemporaneous parallel in the royal family?
Eric?
Well, I was going to say something. Oh, yeah, I was going to say that it's interesting also that you don't actually get the gods appearing in this, which is like sort of what might happen if gods are absent. I don't know, sort of, there's no sense of, higher power, I don't know, sort of, or accountability to a higher power.
Yes, because we talk about gods, but it's not very clear whether there are separate gods to these people who aren't gods, or whether these people are sort of gods, or are they sort of Marvel Universe superpower people that they're basically human, but they have additional abilities that make them a bit special. So we've got some giants who can throw strong, big stuff. They're really strong. That's one of the big questions for the end of the sequence of actually going, what is this universe? Actually, what are the rules? What can people get away with? What are the stakes? If Jupiter can't die, if none of these people really can die, they can sort of die, but maybe not. But some of them can. That changes how the text functions. Sadly, we have run out of time this session. Anyone burning to say anything, throw it at me now. Biff, or forever hold your peace, or hold on to it till next time. All that remains is to thank all these wonderful people for all their wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.